It's the Chit Chat Show. Chit Chat Show. Chit and chat like there's no tomorrow. I'm your host, Favorite Flav. What's up? I'm yapping, no capping, that's real. Tune in, settle in, let's grill. Chit Chatters, yeah, that's you. Hi everybody, welcome to the Chit Chat Show, where Chit Chat like there's no tomorrow. I'm your host, Favorite Flav, and we are back again with another episode. And this is series, if you don't know already, where I interview mixture of people, variety of different people where they are creatives, entrepreneurs, anything art, anything that they use social media to boost their platform, anything at all, to be honest, you know what I mean? People who are trying to spread some type of message, some type of work through social media. And yeah, so that's basically the reason of this series, because a lot of the things that we see on social media are usually final products of things. We never really see the depths behind those footages, the editing, none of that. We never really get to know who these people really are. For the most part, we just get to see what they're doing through a 1 minute clip for the most part. You know what I mean? So welcome to this series. And so let's get into it. So today I am joined by future lawyer Joshua Mutshaila, a law student, and he's in his second year. So very soon I'll know a lawyer to call. You know a lawyer to call. You know what I mean? You never know. So, and honestly, hopefully we don't need one. But just in case, we're going to have a business card coming up. So he uses his contact to share about himself, share about his faith and law, two things that he passionately studies about. And he teaches people things that he's been learning about law that also ties with the Bible in a way. He only just started a few months ago, and it's been cool to watch, follow along, learn something here, learn something there. I have the pleasure to interview Joshua on his background, journey, and more. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Faith Law Project by Joshua Mutshaila. Yeah. Cool. Okay, Ben, before I get into the questions, I'll take a moment to thank you. Thank you for coming on my show, on my podcast. And okay, cool. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Joshua Mutshaila, like you already said. I am from the DRC. I was born in DRC, but I was raised in Johannesburg, South Africa. Okay. So I lived in South Africa for quite some time. And then came to the United States, went to Casco Bay High School, went to USM, and then went straight to law school after that.
Okay, when did you move to Maine?
So I moved to Maine in 2017.
2017,
yeah.
Okay. How old were you at that time? I was trying to do the math, but the math isn't coming quick.
15.
15,
yeah.
Okay, that wasn't bad. So you still have memories from back home. Okay, cool. So what sparked the idea of Faith Law Project?
So for me personally, I wanted a platform that was able to reach out to people who were not necessarily well versed or well knowledgeable of the law first. And for faith, I am a Christian and I believe in the teachings of Jesus Christ. And so for me, being able to express myself, express my beliefs in platforms that, are very much used nowadays is one of the ways in which I wanted to share my beliefs and the message. There's a very popular verse in Matthew 28, verse 19, that says, go into the world, and preach this gospel. And one of the many ways you can preach the gospel is through social media, content, and just using the talents you have to share.
For sure. So what made you want to study law?
For me, I'd say it goes way back into 2018, 2019. I took a class called Street Law, and my high school teacher at the time was teaching that class. And that class focused on criminal law and civil law. And the civil law aspect captured my mind. And we focused on the Supreme Court case that happened, I believe, in 1953, 1954, Brown versus Board of Education. And in that case, there was an attorney called Thurgood Marshall, and he argued before the Supreme Court. And when the argument went, he desegregated school systems that were infested with racism, segregation, and at the time there was a doctrine that was still standing that was called separate but equal. That meant that it didn't mean that in reality, but it meant that black students and white students would go to different schools and quote unquote have equal rights, quote unquote have equal accessibility. In practice, that was not true. Black students had inferior education systems versus, white students having more superior and more better education systems. And so the Supreme Court ruled unanimously saying that separate but equal is unconstitutional. And so after watching that documentary, after learning about the power that attorneys have, that lawyers have,
Yeah.
and that if they're able to craft an argument, a legal principle, a theory, and argue it on the merits, it could destabilize a system that has been existing for a very long time. And that's what happened. And so for me, I was like, wow, a person, a lawyer, someone with that kind of education could do that. And so that prompted me to go learn more about the law and how important that can affect the world.
Okay, and how is you studying law now? How is that going for you?
You know, law school is one of the hardest things you could ever do. I think this is arguably one of the hardest academic endeavors I have ever gone on, just because it is rigorous, it is time consuming for the right reasons. It is hard to grasp legal concepts. And I'm a first generation soon to be lawyer, so nobody in my family has gone to law school or has gone through this process. And so I'm navigating all of these things by myself. And so going through all of these things without guidance or assistance from, a extended point of view makes it extremely challenging. But I have one of my best friends who I go to law school with, Joseph. We're in it together, and so we're learning the whole process together. And so I think being able to have community in law school is one of the best things. Not just like having community in the law school, but outside of the law school.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions about just higher education overall is the neglect of mental health. When you're pursuing anything, and in this particular context, law school or graduate school, there is so much mental strain that you take on. There's a huge toll that comes on you, and just being able to have people around you makes a huge difference. So if you're interested in going to law school, it is hard, but you can do it. If I'm doing it, you can do it.
It's doable.
So it's doable. It's doable.
So you said it's really challenging. It takes a lot out of somebody. Who or what continues to motivate you, inspire you to keep pushing?
That's a very good question. So I would say myself first, just because my passion is to help people and help people with their legal problems primarily. So I'd say just looking at how far I've come, my own experiences, the things I've been able to achieve by the grace of God, obviously, that motivates me to keep pushing. I look at my past experiences, my past challenges, things that I was not able to achieve back then that I'm achieving now, motivates me to move forward. But I'll also say there are a lot of heroes, that I looked up to and I still look up to. For example, Thurgood Marshall being one of the first Black Supreme Court justices in American history. And it's the same lawyer that argued a lot of cases and won before the Supreme Court is a great example, of civil rights for me.
Yeah.
And there are other people too, in my immediate community, like my brother, my pastor, and also my friends too, who are also pursuing different career avenues but are still pressing on. And so you have people who are doing real estate, you have people who are doing a master's in MBAs, people who are doing public policy and management. Seeing them pursue and want to be impactful in society also motivates me to keep pushing.
That's awesome. Okay, so now, in what way does your background play a role in all of this? Because you're from the DRC, you were raised in Johannesburg, so and now you're in Maine. So like, in what way did all of that play a role into you being here?
You know, that's a very loaded question, and I think I want to give that to God, because I don't think in my life I ever imagined myself in this position. For me, I grew up wanting to be like a soccer player. That's like every African boy's dream, to play soccer in the Premier League or in La Liga. And for me, like, I wanted to play for Manchester United and Real Madrid. Those are my favorite teams. So I grew up wanting to do that, and that's not what God had planned for me.
Yeah.
For me, my vision at the time was, I'll be in Africa, figure out life in Africa, and see what happens. Never really thought about coming abroad or coming here, and so I'd give that to God. And I think my background does play somewhat of a role in terms of like my future and my purpose. Primarily, I'm one of the first Congolese, students in Maine to ever go to law school. There hasn't been that much of us over there. So for me, it's like, wow, this is part of identity. This is part of culture. It's kind of like record breaking, being one of the first. But I think that also comes with the pressure to succeed. There is immense pressure, particularly on African students who live abroad, whether in the United Kingdom or in the United States, to either be doctors, lawyers, or engineers.
And you fit into one of that.
I just happened to fit into one of them. But that was not part of the reason. I had my own passions, like I mentioned.
Yeah, for sure.
My parents guided me, but, my own passions got me here.
Yeah.
I think my identity from Johannesburg, I think that also shaped, my perspective on, advocacy. There is a lot of issues happening in Africa in general, but like, in South Africa primarily, there's a lot of discrimination against like other people from different countries. And so growing up in that kind of context and culture, you get to see that there are certain limitations that people experienced. And just seeing that from a human standpoint of view, got me interested in, why do people behave this way?
Yeah.
Is it historical? What is the social science behind this?
Yeah.
And for me, like, my passion was driven from that, because I love social studies, I love history. And so I would say that aspect of growing up in SA, taking those history classes, geography classes, and all of those things definitely shaped my path, because I was never a good physics or chemistry or math student. I was always passionate about reading and writing. And so I think coming to the United States definitely made that aspect shine, just because I went to Casco Bay High School, which was primarily expeditionary. So basically you do public policy events. You learn how to public speak. You learn how to present information that you've done research on. So that fine-tuned a lot of my passions. And so I would say Congo is my identity. I was born there. South Africa was, the molding, shaping phase.
Yeah.
And I think coming to the US, and in Maine particularly, was the execution point of like, okay, this is the pathway you're supposed to go on. This is the journey you're supposed to embark on. And here's a group of people who you will impact, and I think that's probably like my background.
Okay. Wow, you worded that so perfectly. Okay, cool. Challenges, because law school is challenging. College itself is very challenging, especially when you have to deal with background life stuff as well, So like, what would you say is the biggest challenge in law school so far?
I think the biggest challenge, well, there's a bunch of challenges, but I think one of the biggest challenges is accessibility. Law school in itself is hard to get in. You have to take the LSAT first, which is like one of the, I want to say, barriers that prevents you from coming in. You first have to have a great GPA, decent but not too low. You have to have at least a 3.0 and above.
Yeah.
And then you have to take the LSAT, which you have to do really well on. And then you have like 4 to 5 essays that you have to write, not including the application itself. So there's a bunch of processes that you have to go through to get to law school. And then once you're in law school, scrape everything you learned. Here's a new way of learning. Here's a new way of writing. Here's a new way of this and that and that.
Yeah.
And then the books are expensive too. So if you don't have like extended resources to like help you navigate, the tuition, the fees, and all of the things that, first generation law students have to deal with, the whole process can be discouraging. It can be, demoralizing just because you don't have that access.
For sure.
And so I think that's the most jarring part. Like, you could be one of the smartest, one of the brightest, but if you don't have, the financial, accessibilities, that's a barrier. So I think that is a challenge in law school. The academic rigor, if you're, again, first generation, all of these things will not make sense.
Yeah.
The way you write in law school is different from the way you write in undergrad. We use citations, we use the blue book, we look at statutes, we look at codes. And so everything that we learn, in your first doctrinal year everything is completely new. You don't know what's what. And I thought political science would help me because I majored in political science and criminology. That did not help me at all.
Yeah.
You just learn the basic fundamentals of, 3 branches of government. But other than that, everything else is brand new. And I think that's what makes it challenging.
Yeah.
You have to be disciplined in time management. On average, it takes about 3 to 4 hours to do homework for one class. And imagine if you have 2 classes the next day, that's close to 8 hours of studying.
Imagine you have work on top of
that.
That's
So
crazy.
there's challenges, but then just like in law school, there's an exception to every rule. With a grain of salt, I say that. There's also ways in which you can go around the difficult challenges. And that's where you have mentorship. This is where you reach out and get out of your comfort zone. I think that's like one of the things that, being in a space where you're a few students of color can be challenging, but you have to take that leap of faith.
Yeah.
You have to trust somebody. You have to reach out to somebody, who will be able to give you that guidance and who's gone before you. And for me, I had that mentor before I got into law school. And so I wasn't as lost. I wasn't as confused just because I had someone who was pouring into me. And so I think having that one person or that group of people will make the journey much more smoother. Not easier, but smoother.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. I just feel like I know you said you're one of the very few Congolese people that has been to law school here in Maine, which is so crazy because there's a lot of Congolese.
There's a lot of us. There's a lot of us in the community.
There's a lot of Congolese in Maine.
Yeah, when you look at the numbers, it's actually insane.
Yo,
it's very it's crazy.
It's so crazy. But anyways, what piece of advice would you give to someone maybe planning on going into law school? Are there like certain questions that they need to ask themselves that maybe like you have asked yourself before proceeding?
I think there's a lot of things, but I'll summarize it in a few. I think one of the first questions is, what is your purpose? Why do you want to go to law school? I think purpose defines a lot of things.
Yeah.
Once you figure out the purpose behind your desires to go to law school or to pursue graduate school, it makes it easier. When you know what your purpose is, what you were born to do, the problems you were born to solve, it makes your decision making easier. And because law school is a time commitment, you will lose connections with your friends. You will lose time with family. You will lose time making money, getting your bread up, like we say. You won't have bread, I think that's the most challenging part. You'll be broke. So figuring that out, and also knowing that this might be a financial burden on you if you don't have a plan. So purpose defines, it defines the goal of getting to law school. So just knowing, why do you want to do it? Why do you want to go, and trap yourself in a building for 3 years and then take a bar exam that you might pass or fail? Like all of that for nothing, you feel? So you have to figure out that part. And then I think the second question you have to ask yourself is, how am I going to get there? Or what am I going to do to get there? You could have a vision, but if you don't execute the vision, it remains a vision. So what am I going to do? Who will I talk to? Who will I seek? Who will I ask? What will I do? Not to preach, but there's a verse that Jesus says. He says, ask, and you'll get an answer. Knock, it will open. You know what I mean? Like he makes the principles
Seek
there.
and ye shall
Seek
find.
and you shall find. Basic principles that you don't even have to be a Christian to apply. Just like look at those principles and see why am I getting there? And so once you figured out who you will ask, who you will meet up, then that makes the journey, again, I say, smoother. And then the last thing I'd say is, are you willing to commit? Because you may have asked the right people, You may have figured out why you want to go to law school, but then now it's the commitment part. Are you ready to lose time with friends?
Yeah.
Are you ready to lose time with family? Are you ready to be trapped in the library for hours and hours and hours? You know, and that's where you really have to go back to your vision board and say, why did I decide to do this? You know, if the finances are met, if you have the purpose and the vision, are you ready to commit?
Yeah.
You know, I think the commitment part is one of the most challenging things. It's like, even when you do bad, are you still going to stay? Because law school is a very intense environment, and whether unintentionally or intentionally, you will find a spirit of competitiveness. You know what I mean? Like, you'll want to be competitive because basically you're going against your classmates for the jobs, you're going against your classmates for the grades. And so when you get bad grades, you know, you might not get that job you're looking for. Are you going to give up?
Yeah.
And so I think those are the questions you'd ask yourself, those 3 questions. And, you know, if somebody's out there that's interested in going to law school or are motivated to go to law school, go for the right reasons. I think that's the baseline. If you know why you want to go to law school, who you want to impact, and that you were born to do it, you know, it's not going to be easy, but, you know, the journey will be worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, a competition, I feel like maybe as lawyers, you do need to, like, be competitive with everything because in the court, you're in competition with other people. So it's not like I'm going to let you win this. So, no.
You have to defend your client zealously.
Yeah.
You know, it's part of the rules too. So you can't not do your best. And I think that's where the law school training helps a lot of law students become competent, you know, and competency is one of the most important things, you know, being able to fully represent your client, you know, with the best knowledge, with the best that you can give, you know, because you're a servant to the client, you know, you're not the boss of the client.
Yeah. I know you said, like, well, one of those questions is, like, you need to know your purpose, know your why. So, like, what is your purpose?
That's a very good question. So
I mean, you had to ask yourself this. So.
Yeah, I had to ask myself this many times, and I think for me, it took a while to figure out purpose, just because purpose is something you discover. I don't think it's something that's just like magically out there.
Yeah.
I think it's something you discover, and for me, I put it in the lens of my faith and my belief in God. I believe that God gave me gifts and talents to serve people, you know, and for me, my purpose stems from being able to share the gospel, number one, which is primarily like what my main focus is.
Yeah.
Apart from my desire to be a lawyer, is to share the gospel, you know, and that comes to public speaking. You know, I learned that public speaking is a great tool. I learned that God gave me that gift, you know, to be able to speak comfortably in a group of people, to connect with people. And so for me, my purpose is just sharing the gospel with people, and obviously using the platform, as I mentioned, to share that. But then the overall purpose behind my vision, my goals, is to also go out there and impact people. It may be one person, you know. There's a quote that says, impact one person, that person might be the president. Impact that one person, that person might be a terrorist. So there's 2 sides of impact.
Yeah.
You know, so how you impact people will shape the next generation.
For sure.
And so for me, that's kind of like what I believe my purpose is to gain knowledge, you know, be educated, not only in worldly matters, but also, you know, biblical, spiritual, you know, just growing in every facet so I can be a resource to people.
For sure.
And so that's, you know, that's where the platform comes from. That's where like the education piece comes from. And I think that people are learning and benefiting from the little knowledge that I have.
Yeah. And honestly, purpose is the thing that like people spend their whole life finding and trying to figure out. I know some people like, yeah, I know my purpose is to help people, but like, how?
That's a good question.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, okay, yes, help people, but how are you gonna help people that is gonna be fulfilling to you? Because you could give a homeless person $1 and keep it pushing, like, okay, cool, you're helping somebody, you know what I mean? But like, yes, it could be fulfilling to you, but it's like, how are you meant to like help people with the talents that has been given to you, you know? And it's like, do you even know your talents?
Right,
and things
right,
like that,
right.
You know, like,
and I could argue, well, not argue, that's not good to you.
We're not in court.
We're not in court. Objection. But I was gonna say, like, don't you think that this is kind of a purpose for you? Like, look at the amount of people that will watch this.
Yeah,
Like,
definitely.
you find joy, you find peace, you find fulfillment, and I think that that's what purpose comes to do. For me, like when I'm reading textbooks, I'm not like, oh, I'm reading textbooks. Sometimes I am, but like there's joy behind that.
Yeah.
And I think that's what one of the biggest indicators of purpose is joy, like being happy. And it's not attached to monetary value. Like if your joy and happiness, and obviously people say, well, money is happiness, but in reality, you find people who are rich but still are in drug addiction. You find people who are rich but still kill themselves. So money is not equivalent to joy. Money is not equivalent to purpose. It's a tool, but it's not the end. The ends. So for me, I think like, when you're finding joy behind what you're doing, then you truly have found purpose.
And I think same with success too. It's like people think that being successful means being rich, but like it goes so much deeper than that. You know what I mean? Because me personally, I feel like I would say that I feel somewhat successful being able to do a podcast, because I do feel like this is part of my story. This is part of a purpose that I have. I know like it's not gonna stop just at podcasting, but this is something that I enjoy doing, recording the video, editing the videos, posting it, dropping it, promoting it. Those are things that I find joy in.
I got a question for you.
Okay.
I know you are asking the questions, but like, have you thought of yourself as like a talk show host? Have you seen yourself as a talk show host?
Honestly, I haven't really thought that far. But I think like after hosting the Afrochella, I'm like, I feel like I can do this for real, because I've always never really been one to step out of my comfort zone, especially now being like in front of like hundreds of people and things like that. It's like it can be frightening, but like being on that stage, I'm like, I could do this for real. Like, what is stopping me? It's like, dang, like I've been holding myself back for so long, always saying like, yes, I'm shy, I'm this, I'm not that outgoing, but I'm just like, like I can actually like do this, go up to random people that I don't know and just start conversation. Like, you know what I mean? I'm just like, wow, I've been holding myself back. But a talk show, honestly, the word is my oyster. Why not?
Yeah, no, I could see a Jennifer Hudson situation going on.
Like, why not? Like, hey, I mean, it'll be fun, to be honest. I feel like for me, as long as I'm having fun with it, I'm enjoying it, it doesn't feel dreadful to me, I'm all for it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And I feel like even with you saying law school can be challenging, it takes a lot, it drags you away from your friends, family, a whole lot of things, but you seem to be enjoying doing that. You know what I mean? Like, and honestly, with some things too, is like you need some processes, you do need to be away from family and friends to be able to become what it is that you need to become, because even when like speaking, like if we're speaking on the Bible and this with Jesus and things like that, there are moments where he stepped away from his disciples. You know what I mean? He stepped away from his disciples, and I think that that's the same with people trying to go after something. It's like those people are going to be there. You need to take yourself out of that equation to be able to fulfill what it is that you need to fulfill.
That's facts, man. Like you actually sparked like one of the verses, Matthew chapter 4, where Jesus, is in the wilderness fasting 40 days, you know what I mean? And the enemy comes to tempt him. But like, that's a great point where you pointed, like he needed to be secluded. You know? He needed to pray. He needed to seek God to be able to fulfill that mission. And so that's a very great point.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so how many law firms have you worked for?
So three in total. So I can't drop the names, I don't know the rules to that. I gotta figure it out.
But you didn't sign an NDA though, no?
I actually did. So so there's some things I can't disclose. But I worked for 3 firms. I'll keep it at that. I worked for 3 firms.
They got you signing NDAs already.
Yes, you have to. So the first firm I worked for 2 years. And then the second firm I worked for was only for 3 months. And that's the summer internship that, law students, it's not mandatory, but it's always great to do an internship over the summer. And so in my first firm, I was a file clerk. So a paper pusher, basically.
Okay.
Just reviewing documents, learning about what's happening in the cases, but then being able to enter them into the system. And then the second firm I worked for, I was actually a summer associate. So basically, you're an attorney. You have a number that allows you to do work on behalf of clients while being under supervision. And so basically, everything you've learned in your first year of law school is applied in the summer.
Okay.
So I worked on a lot of matters like trust and estates, contracts, civil procedure.
Yeah.
I did some pro bono work where we were able to help some clients not get evicted, So all of those things. Did some immigration work where I wrote like a memo to the attorney, and that covered a lot of things that concerned laws going on in the country. And so that's what I did in my this past summer at the second firm, and then now I'm working as a legal assistant to an immigration lawyer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So 3 firms.
Cool. Okay, we're just gonna keep it at that for real.
Yeah. In my past life, I think y'all saw me working at Chipotle. I did work at Chipotle, so yeah.
Yeah, I don't need my podcast getting sued, so I'm not even gonna get deep into the rest of the question. Okay, so with those 3 firms, you being in law school, working, you know what I mean? Have you ever struggled with imposter syndrome, being in those spaces, but also questioning yourself, dang, am I even supposed to be here? Can I even really do this? You know what I mean? Have you ever really struggled with imposter syndrome?
Yes, that's a very good question because, when you're, like I said, being one of the first of many Congolese and also Black students in law school, you're sometimes the only Black person, in a bunch of these spaces. And so for me, I was the first Black hire, which is insane. I was the first Black hire. I was the first Black summer associate, So it's man, the pressure is immense. Every time, they gave me an office. I had an office with my name on it and everything.
Big
everything. Everything was there, but
a picture too.
Yeah, I was on the website and everything.
Wow.
But then the fear sometimes would creep in and be am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? There was no Black lawyer in the building.
Yeah.
That I could go talk to.
Yeah.
And so the imposter syndrome is there. Or was there at the time, and obviously, trying to find the right mentors, during the summer internship to help you navigate those things. And I'll reach out to my professor, who's my advisor, and I talked to him about what I was feeling. And what he would say is that you deserve to be there. So having someone reaffirm, your intelligence, reaffirm your capabilities, reaffirm your knowledge, intelligence, helped me a lot. But it's real. It's real when you're doing real work for clients, when you're doing real work for the firm, you're billing hours, you have an hourly rate that you're billing clients.
Yeah.
So you have to be competent. You have to be excellent. You have to try your best. And, being the only Black person is if you mess up, it's you. We know it's you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that was a challenge for the first month or so. And then eventually, when you're working as an associate or as an intern, there's evaluations. And so when you go through the evaluations, you know what you did wrong, and the attorneys were amazing. I worked for great attorneys this past summer, and they gave great evaluations. They told me I did a great job. They told me my writing was amazing. You know what I mean? And for me, that's wow, I doubted myself. But the work product said something completely different.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of people who are in those spaces feel. You won't know that you're successful until someone tells you you're successful.
Yeah,
And so that was my experience with working in firms and being one of the only Black people working there. But one thing that my mom always told me is that stand out, shine out. Your skin already makes you stand out. So why not your work do that for you?
Yeah.
So that's what my mom would tell me.
Hey, period. Shout out Mama Duke.
Shout out to mom.
Okay, so how important as the support from your friends, family, been throughout your journey of being in school and you starting your content?
I think for school, my family has been really supportive. My parents are for it. Obviously African parents want they want a lawyer, they want an engineer.
They didn't bring you to America to do nonsense.
You see, those are good numbers for the family, good statistics. But my parents are very supportive. My mom's always encouraging. My dad's always asking me, "Hey, how's it going? How's it doing?" So my parents are very supportive. My siblings are very, very supportive too. I think they know when not to bother me.
Yeah.
Because they know I'm studying, or they know where I'm at. They'll always know that I'm at the library.
Yeah.
so they know where I'm at. So I think family wise, everything has been good. I think friends, I think my friends have been supportive too. Like I mentioned, one of my best friends is in law school with me. So we're going through the journey together, like even before I came here, we were hanging out, you know what I mean? And talking about law school problems.
Yeah.
You feel so like there's great supportive structure. And it's always good when you see people wanting you to win.
Yeah.
When you have a crowd of supporters, a crowd that will cheer you on, it makes it easier to get to the finish line.
For sure.
You feel so that I feel like that's been great in terms of content. It was good. Like I was like, wow, people are actually asking me to do videos. You know, like people are interested in learning, especially TikTok. I don't know what's going on Instagram, but like my TikTok base has been great.
Honestly, TikTok is really where it's at. So I need to get on that too.
Yeah, so I think TikTok, random people are like, keep going. Random people are saying we're inspired. So I think like that's been great. And obviously, I haven't posted in a while because, we are busy as students. But the support has been great. And I think, like, people are being impacted. So for me, that's like, okay, if people are being impacted, I'm going to continue doing this.
Yeah. And how does, like, that support system help you to grow and stay grounded?
Yeah, I think, like, the support system is crucial just because, for me, I have mentors at school, mentors at church, and so I have a very good active church community that encourages me, that checks up on me, and I think like that's the importance of having a community, whether it's church, whether it's a group, whether for example other entities on campus that we have. We have lots of groups, like we have Black Law Student Association, we have Women in Law Association. So all of these groups are places in which you can get strengthened. And so for me, my church community has been really, really supportive in terms of like understanding where I'm at, and also giving me, grace. Because, like I'm at church most of the time, so they be asking, Brother Josh, where you at? And I'm just like, I'm at the library right now. But, just having people who can check on you, like I said, and who want you to win, has been very supportive. And in terms of like my content, I have a lot of people from church and also people from different churches and different, even different faiths actually, who are liking and responding to my videos. And so I think that's like a beautiful outreach.
Yeah, that's good. So I know, being in law school can be pretty hectic. Trying to stay locked in can be pretty hectic. And we already spoke about, you're not really seeing your friends. You're not seeing your family. Church is there. They're calling you up and all that stuff. But it's just like, how do you try to balance your school life, right, with your outside life?
That's a very great question. So I'm going to put in a plug for people to read this book called Balance by Tori Roberts. It's a great book.
Okay.
I read this book in 2023, just before I started law school, because I was like, man, it's going to be busy. When you were like, after I got the acceptance letter, I was like, let me watch some vlogs and see like how students are doing it. And I found that one of the challenges that law students have is separating the law student from the person. And so for me, I had to go read books. And I read this book called Balance by Tori Roberts, and he mentioned great points towards the end of the book,
Towards the end, not the beginning.
But I mean, at the beginning it was good too, but like towards the end, the book starts cooking. And so for me, towards the end, there was a quote that he said. He said that you should know the power of no and the power of yes. And for me, that was a dividing line between saying yes to things and saying no to things.
Yeah.
And so being a law student and also being a dedicated, servant at church and a family man, it takes a lot of time to figure out the balance, and also working too, so I think for me, it's, sleeping. I think sleep is important, especially when you're in law school. You don't get much sleep, but you have to force yourself to sleep just because you want to be present, energetic, and also alive as a person.
Yeah.
And so for me, like being able to go to school Monday to Friday and also working during the week and also being at church from like Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday, you have to figure it out. And so for me, one of the first mistakes I think I made in my first year of law school was to detach myself from a lot of things that were supportive. So I wasn't with family a lot. I didn't interact with friends a lot, and I wasn't at church a lot. So that made it incredibly hard for me to socialize. I think that's one of the realist problems that law students have after you're done with law school. When you want to quote unquote reintegrate back in with your friends and families, it's hard because you're like, I've been cooked up at the library. I've been, away, and this is how my mind is constructed to be. Even when you're with people, you're thinking of, how can I prove this person wrong? You're like, what you said, it's not really correct. But you see, like, shifting outside of that requires balance. And so after reading that book and getting into law school and also being in my second year, I figured out a plan, and so for me, it is staying connected, maintaining those connections. I try to be at church on Wednesday. I try to be there on Sunday. I try to be there on Saturdays when I can. Even on every Saturday, every first Saturday of the new month, we have men's fellowship on Saturdays, at church. And so we meet as men, eat breakfast, pray together. And so that's maintained balance, in the church area. Family area, I try to be present. I try to play video games with my siblings. I try to play Uno with my siblings. I try to make, connections with them. And then academically, like that's a dedication. I can't even choose not to be dedicated. But then there are moments in time where I try to give myself some grace, where it's like, you know what? In the famous words of a person I cannot mention, I can't kill myself for school is what they said. So at the end of the day, school's important, but it's not the end of my life. You feel? So if I miss an assignment, if I miss homework, if I don't study today, in the first year I'd be like, oh my God, I'm gonna fail. But then after you've done it, you're like, I know how to come back. So for me, I needed to be comfortable with who I was as a law student, and sometimes accept that I'm not gonna get everything done. I'm not going to be perfect at finishing my assignments. I'm not going to be always prepared for a cold call in class, where the professor calls on you and you're going one-on-one for 15 minutes. Like, there's going to be some times where you'll ask for a pass. And that's just reality because life happens. And so being able to learn who you are, your circumstances, your family, and other things outside is really crucial. And so for me, that book, I recommend it. Balance by Tori Roberts. Please read that book. Great book.
Okay, so now how do you also balance your time with God in all of it?
Yeah, oh man, that's every Christian struggle, man.
That's real.
There's sometimes you don't pray, there's sometimes you pray, there's sometimes you pray inconsistently up and down. And that happens. And I think that's the beauty of, Christian faith, is that it's a journey, and you have to have consistency. If it's 5 minutes of prayer, as long as you're doing that every day, you're maintaining that relationship. And I think there's a misconception in our faith. People think you have to pray 10 hours. You have to do this and do that. While in reality, everything was accomplished for you on the cross. And our responsibility as Christians is to, go seek the Lord. The Bible says, come to the throne with boldness, come to the throne with expectation. And that could mean 5 minutes if you're getting back, in your relationship with God. That could mean 10 minutes for somebody. That could mean an hour for somebody, and it's where you are in life and the dedication and the commitment you're giving to your faith. And like I said, for me, I have made it a priority for my faith to be number one over everything. It's part of my life, but it's the most important thing. Another famous verse that we all know that Jesus said, he says, what will you gain if you fulfill your soul? If you give your soul away, if you get everything in this life but lose your soul, what do you gain? And so for me, that's always a ringer in my head. It's like, I have to be dedicated. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to seek God, just because my life depends on that. I think one of my first opening videos in my Faith and Law projects was talking about Christian Constitution and United States Constitution. I made a distinction where I mentioned that the U.S. Constitution is a letter and a law that applies to United States citizens. And the Bible is a love letter that God gave to us as believers. It's our guidance, it's our direction. And I think for me, being able to, be in church, if you think about what's happening even in Nigeria right now, there are a lot of Christians who are being persecuted, who are being killed for simply going to church, and who knows, there might be a time even in the United States where we won't be able to gather in church. You know what I mean? Who knows? But just being able to be there among believers, reading the Word of God, coming together in unity in prayer, that's so significant. It's the life force. And just to quote a last verse, and I'll let you ask the next question, is what Jesus says in the book of John, man. He says, I am the vine, you are the branches. That simply means that he's the source. If the branches are detached from the vine, it is hard for nutrients, it is hard for water to flow to the branches.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That means those branches will die. Same concept. If we're disconnected from the church, if we're disconnected from prayer, if we're disconnected from reading the Word of God, spiritually we will die. You may not fall down physically and die, but spiritually, the foundation is, becoming a mess.
Yeah.
And so that's like the reason why I keep myself, grounded and rooted and try to balance the faith too.
Yeah. I know you just spoke about the U.S. Constitution, so the law in the United States and then the law in the Bible. So going on to my next question, because I have seen your videos as well, and you speak about laws in the Bible, and as believers, we have to abide in those laws, and being here in the United States, and as a society, we'll have to abide in those laws as well. So, are there any ways that both parts of the law, the Bible and the Constitution, are there any ways that they've clashed together that you've noticed?
Man, I think there are a lot of things that have clashed. And mind you, there's history behind both, the Bible and the Constitution. I think there's been some clashes when it comes to, if we're looking at it from a historical lens, the Bible predates the U.S. Constitution, and I think for me, like I mentioned in my first video, the Bible is supreme law over all kinds of laws, and that's my belief.
Yeah, definitely.
And everything else is secondary. And if you look at, the morals and the laws that are written in the Constitution, you can find bits of scripture in it. You know what I mean? The whole double jeopardy, saying that a person cannot be tried twice for the same crime. You find that even in the Bible, you find scripture where, Jesus Christ was tried once. It says he died once and for all, and all sins were forgiven. You can't be tried twice. So you can trace back a lot of similarities from the Constitution to the Bible. And, I think from a clash point of view, I will say before the 13th Amendment, before the 14th Amendment, there were definitely some clashes where a lot of Black people in America were enslaved, and before that law came into existence, that was the norm. And that is very much against what Jesus Christ preached.
Yeah.
There's inconsistencies with that. A lot of the things that, that happened historically do not align with the biblical principles of Jesus. And so for me, I find there's some clashes. And obviously, laws nowadays, the way laws are made are through Congress, where Congress meets, confers, there's a bill on the table, and then eventually, if it's approved by the Senate and the House, it goes to the president, and the president signs it, it becomes a law, right? And then there's common law. Common law is derived from judges. So this is judge-made law. When two parties are arguing, for example, maybe on a contracts issue, it will go before the judge, and the judge will make a decision, and that decision becomes a law until it gets, overturned by the Supreme Court. So that's the way laws are created. And then you have the state legislature that makes its own laws by votes and stuff like that. And so these laws can be created while the Word of God, the law is the law. It's from God. It's stamped, sealed, and approved. You can't create new laws.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And everything the Bible says that God made is good. So all the laws God has given to us, the morals, the principles from Genesis to Revelation are good, while versus man-made law can either affect people in a positive or a negative way.
Yeah.
Haven't you seen on the news new policies being made, new laws being dictated? that are affecting people.
Yeah.
And that is the difference. There's a fundamental difference with God's law and the world's law, is that the world's law is subject to change and God's law is not subject to change. You know, everything is eternal, everything is fixed, everything is in its place for a reason.
Yeah. So my next question is, since you started your faith law project, since you started your content, what is something new that you have learned about yourself?
You know, naturally, I shy away from like being in front of a camera. You know, people say I'm very social, and you know that is true. Like, I'm very good at like socializing with people in
Yeah.
person, but I realized that it was a little challenging for me to stand in front of a camera and just like talk and talk and talk and talk. And so I learned that about myself, that it's incredibly hard to speak in front of a camera and be confident in what you're saying, because you know, once it's out there, it's out there. You know,
Yeah.
digital footprint is a little hard to retrieve.
It's real.
Unless, you know, Mark Zuckerberg is like, okay, I'm gonna save you, I'll take this off. But it's there.
Honestly, you could just blame it on AI now.
You know, just, yeah, at this point you could say, yeah, it's AI. It's AI generated. But I think that was like one of the challenges, is like being able to stand in front of a camera, being confident, and also delivering accurate information. You know, I think that's one of the things that in law school you learn. You have to give information that is accurate.
Yeah.
You know, even as an attorney, if when you're representing a client, maybe in a trial, you know, you can't give false information. You can't bring, because it's gonna go on appeal, and then on appeal, the judge on appeal will be like, what you said or what you presented inconsistent. You know, so all of those things come into play when I'm, you know, in front of the camera. I'm like, okay, God, you know, I'm going to be sharing to Christians and non-Christians.
Yeah.
How can I, you know, effectively deliver what you have given to me?
Yeah.
And then also for my legal viewers and non-legal viewers, how can I educate you in a way and in a sense that makes sense? Because the law is complicated. How do I distill the concepts into something that somebody can, you know, understand?
Yeah.
So I think that was a challenge, but I am also learning. I am watching other people do it,
For sure.
and I'm finding ways to be better and effective at doing that.
Awesome. So now, what has been the most impactful case that you've learned in school, and the most impactful case that you've learned in the Bible? One that doesn't have to do with Tugwood Metro, the Board of Education.
Oh
So
man,
something
that's not fair. But okay.
Because you mentioned that like 2 times.
I know,
now,
I mentioned that.
We need something else, something new.
Well, let's see. So definitely not in civil procedure. I don't think there was anything that crazy in Civ Pro contracts. There was one about what is a chicken. I don't think that's relevant. My favorite class, and as of late, is constitutional law. And in constitutional law, we learned about a lot of things. And I'm blanking on the name, and I'll send it to you at some point. But it was a case that used the Commerce Clause, which is one of the powers Congress has to regulate transactions, whether you're buying something, selling something, or whether something is coming to the country, you know, export and imports. And so the Commerce Clause regulates that. And there was a particular case that had to do with, you know, black people not being allowed to eat at restaurants. And so basically, I think there was a law that was put in place, or basically there was a rule that was put in place that prevented black people from going to restaurants. And mind you, at the time, there was a social concept called the Great Migration. You know, so after, you know, enslavement ended, a lot of people of color began to go to different parts of the country, the Great Migration. And after that, people were going to restaurants, and black people were not allowed to go to restaurants. And so I think this was like probably in like the 60s, early 60s, where the Civil Rights Act was, you know, was written. And then you have, you know, Congress using the Commerce Clause to be like, you know what? Black people not going to restaurants affects commerce. And basically the facts was, you know, black people would, you know, go to hotels, they would be on the roads, you know, so why can't they eat at restaurants? And so Congress used the Commerce Clause to overturn that law. You know what I mean? And then there's also a concept called the Dormant Common Clause. So a state cannot make any law that you know, affects the commerce. And so that case for me was like, maybe one of the second cases for me that I was like, wow, we can use legal power, legal concepts to overturn things that are, systemically against groups of people. So that stood out to me. And, there's a bunch of other cases, but at least from memory, because we read a lot of cases, at least from memory, that's what stood out for me in constitutional law. And in the Bible, that's a really good one. There's a lot of stories. But mind you, like in the Bible, a lot of the things that people experience, to us, it's like stories, but for them, it was real. It was real. You know what I mean? So I think the story of Daniel, for me, is like one of my favorites. I believe Daniel is roughly about 12 to 13 chapters. Quick read. And for me, it's chapter 1 that stands out the most. They're brought into slavery into this land of Babylon, and they have this crazy king, who's dictating laws, who's saying that if you pray for 30 days to any god, we will kill you. But Daniel went to go pray. He was like, screw the law. This is very, very, like, for me, it's like he said, screw the law. I'm not gonna listen to you, king. He went and prayed. And then the Bible tells us that they threw him in the den of lions. And the lions did not eat him. So for me, that was like a very interesting thing that he did at the time, where it's like, you know what? God is my king. I'm not going to listen to anybody else. Yeah. And then when Daniel came out of that den of the lions, the king started worshiping God. You know what I mean? And so for me, it's like, if you are so heavily invested in your faith, right, there is no way that God will let you down. Yeah. That's what I drew from that. I was like, if no matter what happens in this world, if I am like rooted, grounded, and believe in God, there's a fine point to that, because Daniel had, I think, 4 friends too who were also thrown in fire, right? So the king made a statue. This is like probably like chapter 3, chapter 4. The king made a statue and said, everybody should bow down to the statue and worship it. And they were like, nah, bro, we're only going to worship God. Screw you, king. The king took them and threw them in fire. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Yes,
So
yes, I remember that.
They were like, you know what? Even if God does not save us, we will not worship your statue. And for me, that was like, man, think about the conviction. Like, imagine if someone held a gun to your head and like, deny your faith right now or you die. Are you going to do it? Yeah. So for me, that was like what I drew from that story. I'm like, it's practical, just as the law is practical, faith is practical. Yeah. So that's what stood out to me in that story of Daniel.
Fire turning to air condition.
Right.
And then the lions might just peep.
The lion was not hungry, man.
So like, that's very, because now I'm thinking, right, for a question for you.
Yeah.
Because, America is America.
Yeah.
The law is the law, yeah, whatever. But law will be changing here and there. You can come back the law, and then in the Bible, like, I guess, like, with the example you just used with Daniel, not doing what the king says, which at that time the king is the law.
Yeah.
So, like, don't you think that at some point in time or moment down the future that you're gonna find yourself in like a situation like that where it's like, dang, like, here's the law that America is forcing onto me, but God is saying this. The Bible is saying this, maybe when it comes to like a case that you might be working on, you know what I mean? And it could be conflict of interest, you know? Yeah. So, like, how, is that, like, how do you think that's gonna, like, work? I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to ask.
I get what you're saying. Like, this is a good time to ask me, because I'm taking professional responsibility. Ethics in the law. So personally, I think if there's, the rules allow us to withdraw from cases. So if there's some things that you feel like you can't handle, for example, this is a gruesome example, but like a lot of cases usually involve rape cases. And so, whatever gender the lawyer is, they can choose to be like, you know what, I'm not going to take this case because I have maybe some morals or some ethics behind it, and you can withdraw from the case. Yeah. I don't know of any cases that are unwithdrawable. I have to go do some research on that. But like for me personally, I think my faith will always go over, the legal, I guess, like, barriers or implications I have to face. And if that means I have to withdraw, then I will withdraw.
Yeah.
And there's just one thing that I can't negotiate. You know how like in relationships there's non-negotiables? That's a non-negotiable for me. You know what I mean? I think that anything that makes me go against my faith and my belief, you know, obviously, like you said, within the law, you can go around it. If I can go around it, I'll go around it. If I can't, I'll have to withdraw.
Yeah, because you can't go against the Bible.
I can't go against the Lord, man.
You can't cut through the corner.
I can't go against the Lord, man.
It's
I can't.
Okay, but even with that same question, kind of, right?
Yeah.
You know, because trying to follow the law of Jesus, like I said, and then the law given to us for society, you know, conflict of interest, conflict. So, like, you know, in the Bible, Jesus said if somebody slaps you, you know.
Keep going, bro. Keep going.
If somebody slaps you on your right or left or whatever, you know, turn your cheek so they can slap it again. Yeah. You know? But in society, you have the right self-defense. You can fight back. You know what I mean? You can sue them. Right. You can press the charges. You know, a lot of different things. You know, you can let the court handle it. Now, let's say if someone was to find yourself in that situation, or you was to find yourself in that situation, you know, what would you suggest for them to do? Or what would you do? A, turn the left cheek. B, self-defend. Or C, press charges.
Man, those are really good options. I think all of these vary based on the circumstances and the facts. I think for self-defense, you know, the concept of self-defense means you're not the initial aggressor. And that means that you didn't throw the first punch. Somebody threw the first punch. Or someone used a gun against you, and you can use force in proportion to that same force. So self-defense, like, I mean, like, yo, if like someone comes in my house and like is trying to drop me, and I'm gonna have to fight back. Especially if I got wife and kids.
You know, they hit you one blow, you're not gonna...
No! I have to defend. But I think even with that, there's a caveat. If there's a way in which I can minimize, you know, tension by maybe locking a door, calling the police. That will always be my first course of action. But if it's like there's clear danger, I have to do something.
Definitely.
You know what I mean? And then call the lawyers, call the doctors. I mean, everything after that. You know how they say... shoot first, answer questions later. I don't believe in that, but in some situations, you know, you might have to do what you have to do. You know, and I think even in the concept of self-defense, you know, you have to go through the facts too. You know, like a judge will look and be like, did you know, pull out a gun first, or did that person pull out a gun, or did you say something that aggravated the person, or did they do it? You know. And obviously, it's a little different if it's in your home. You know, there's something called the castle doctrine where you have to defend your castle. You know, so that's all like criminal law concepts. But I think my first natural response is to find ways to mitigate the danger. But if that's not able to be done, we have to throw hands.
Okay. So someone just came out of nowhere and just slapped you in the face.
I mean, bro. You know, would I hit them back? I mean, like, bro, think about this, man. Like, this just takes me back to my first year of law school, because there's this concept called the plaintiff eggshell concept. So that means if you hit someone and let's say they have like an injury that you're unaware of, you know, let's say, for example, you know, maybe they have like weak bones or like weak skin and they bleed up real quick, you might be liable, you know what I mean? And so like there are some things that you have to take into account when you're thinking about maybe reacting back. And I mean, like, I think I don't want to talk for Jesus, but like you can interpret that scripture in many ways. But I would say, like, in a society right now, yeah, bro, I don't think it's in your best interest. Somebody could be carrying a gun, you know, somebody could be carrying a machete. You never know, especially with like road rage situations. You know what I mean? Like when you're in the road and someone like cuts you off and you try to cut them back off, you never know. So I wouldn't advise it.
No, honestly, I remember I was driving one time to work, and then like I'm just like going into Linton. I just got out the highway, you know. I'm just like trying to go, cool. I entered the very far lane or whatever. I went in front of this car, and like, mind you, the car was back there, but it started speeding up, but I still made it, you know. And then got mad at me, and then went to the other, bro, this man, legit, he honked at me, right?
That's crazy.
And then got to the very far right, you know, still speeding.
That's crazy.
Still honking.
That's crazy.
You know what I mean? And then got in front of me, still yo, I'm just like, yo, nah, no way. You know what I'm saying? And it's crazy too, because cool, now we're in a respectable distance. Now he's on like the middle lane. I'm still just driving.
Yeah.
Because it was driving, but I'm like, you know what, I'm still going to take my time. I'm on my way to work early. That already happens, you know? So, cool. I'm driving and I caught up to him a little bit without even meaning to, right? Now I'm right next to him and look, they started honking again.
Hey, yo.
I said, you can't be time.
Nah, that's crazy. Yeah, bro, listen.
Yo, I'm like, I thought about it, like, I could cut him up too, but you know what? I pray you have a blessed day, sir, you know? But I was like, no way. But hey, in this life, if somebody slaps you, if you slap them back, anything can happen.
Anything can happen, bro. Anything can happen.
You don't know, bro. Like, sometimes you just gotta eat it.
You might have to take the slap and keep it pushing. Keep it pushing.
Oh my God. Sometimes, no. So we've talked. So what's your option? A, B, or C?
Can you tell me the options again?
A, turn the left cheek. B, self-defense. C, press charges.
Yeah, all of those are fact dependent, but like if someone randomly slapped me on the street, I don't know what they're carrying, so I might just turn the left cheek.
Okay.
Sadly.
Okay. So just so somebody's recording because
yeah, so. We can press charges after. So yeah.
Okay, so you told us the challenges of being in law school. You know, what are the best parts of it?
The best part, I think, it's being able to finish the first year. Mm-hmm. The first year is arguably the hardest year, just because everything is new. You don't have time. Everything's pressed for time. And the best part is being able to say, wow, I did that. You know, I went through the stressful periods. I went through the exams. I went through the finals. I went through the sweats, the tears. I mean, I actually cried. Like, I have never cried for school in my entire life. Wow. But in my first year, I cried. It's real, people. Man, it's real. Like that, it's real, you know. So I think being able to accomplish that, you know, and being able to go through that, and also like being able to feel that you belong there. Yeah. Biggest accomplishment. Sure. You know, you feel like, okay, I'm here now. I belong here. I'm part of a community of people that, you know, will help people in the future. But yeah, I think that was like the biggest win. Being able to finish the first year for me was my biggest win. Okay. You know, usually the numbers are really sad for Black students because after the first year they drop out. You know, so me able to come back and be like, I'm going to do this for year 2 and year 3 was a big win for me. So I think that part too plays a large role, and like this is success, you know, and also being acknowledged. You know, I was acknowledged at the school, you know, for a bunch of scholarships, you know, and that in itself was like, it speaks volumes, you know, that I'm doing something correct. Yeah. Congratulations. Wow, you're graduating in May. Yeah. Wow. Not this May though, not 2027. You just finished your first year. I just finished so I'm in my second year now, and then I have a third year. Hey. Yeah, so I'm done 2027. Hey, what do you mean? I thought it was only 2 years. Nah, law school is 3 years. Hey. Yeah, law school is 3 years, people. 3 years, and then you have to study. Well, congratulations in advance. Thank you. Wow, 3 years. Yeah, wow. Yeah. I'm thinking it's like the master's program, 2 years. You know what I mean? Bro. Wow. Okay. Wow, you got it, man. Wait, can I apply for law school if I wanted to? Yes, you can. You can. It doesn't matter what degree. It doesn't matter what degree it is. Preferably, like if you did some writing prior, but like it really doesn't matter. There's some people who, you know, were nurses. You know, some were doctors, and they just did law school. So. Oh wow, interesting. Yeah. Okay, so as you grow and attract more attention, you know, especially with you continuing faith law projects, how do you plan on protecting your peace and energy? Well, you see, like one thing that I was a little cautious about before, you know, creating a social media platform was the backlash, because there's some people who don't believe in what I believe, and there's some people who have their own views and perspectives, and you know, learning how to tackle the conflicts, to tackle the, haters. I haven't had any haters in the comments yet, so I don't know. But I think for me, protecting my peace means, again, like we go back to the whole purpose conversation, like why I'm doing this, So for me, it's like, okay, I know why I'm doing faith and law projects, and I know the end goal and the end result is to help people be educated and be impacted, to see a young Christian man, talking about his faith and talking about hard, complex subjects. That keeps me going. That gives me peace. And I think just being also, I think law school is a great environment for me because it also teaches me how to engage in conflict resolution. In a lot of cases, you'd be either opposing counsel or defense counsel or prosecution or defense, or, you're on the other side of a lawsuit. So there's always going to be that, friendly fire or friendly conflict going on, and knowing how to address those things, and I think for me, if I have any future haters in the comments, which I welcome but don't encourage, we'll find ways to address those, disagreements. And so for me, I think I'm well equipped for that. Yeah.
I mean, you're gonna use the law, so sure. Okay, so what is next for Faith Law Projects and for you? I mean, I know you're graduating in 2027. So like, where do you and you see yourself being a lawyer? Obviously, because why would you be going to law school whatsoever? So what's next for Faith Law Projects and for you, and what should people expect?
I think for me, it's taking baby steps. Obviously, I am still very new to content creating. So I think for me, the next step, at least over 2026 and going to 2027, is just being able to learn more about how to be better at like the content, whether it's camera quality, sound, the content in itself, like being able to properly deliver that and being able to distill that, because there's some people online who like long videos, and then there's a crowd of people who like short videos, and I think that's partly because of our attention span in this generation.
TikTok,
we don't have a strong attention span, so I think being able to navigate those challenges of like finding the fine line between, this is good information or this is overwhelming information that someone might just like scroll up. But there's a group of people who like long videos and there's people who don't. So I think being able to figure out what works for my crowd and my people is something that I'll be figuring out in 2026. And obviously better equipment, better cameras and those little baby steps. But then, the goal is to maybe eventually, start a YouTube channel, maybe potentially, or maybe do something similar to what you're doing right now. I think you're the inspiration right now. You're doing something that a lot of people appreciate. So maybe we might go into the podcast world and have people come and ask questions.
I can see that.
You could see that happening.
I can see it. Yeah, I can see it. I think you have a really good podcast voice. Like,
really?
Yeah, I can see it for sure.
Are you sure people won't fall asleep when I'm talking?
He said, "I recommend this book." Okay, the announcement, got it.
Maybe.
I'm like, okay, like I can see the vision. It could be like honestly, I can see it because I think you could have like, you could make it for people trying to become lawyers, especially like
that's good stuff,
not knowing where to start from, for people who have never been to school or currently in school. You could do episodes with your classmates, touch on different parts of the law, because like it would be like a lot to try to combine everything in as one. So just like, okay, cool, for this one we're gonna talk about this law, talk about this one, and just keep going like that. Because I ain't gonna lie, I don't think I'm gonna pick up a book to read about. Like, I'll listen to something, you know what I mean?
Right.
To pick up a book and then just like, okay, because sometimes it's like, even you're in all of these big words, it's like, it's
true.
It's a lot, So I guess like breaking it down to like people who aren't like trying to be lawyers or are trying to be lawyers can understand, Because I think like maybe even for you, learn like all of those big words could have gotten overwhelming. Like, okay, what does this really mean? This is what it means, in a dictionary, but what does it like really mean in like a real life scenario type thing? So honestly, I could see the podcast being the thing, to be honest, involve your classmates, involve, if you want to have it being featured, just black lawyers or black people trying to be lawyers, do that. Hey, I could see it. I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
I'll put that on my checklist.
Like, I think it'll be pretty cool, to be honest. So, but yeah, I get to learn something about the law.
Okay, thank you. That's very encouraging.
So yeah, definitely. So any final words to the audience, the people watching? You know what I mean? Like anything. This is your stage.
This is the moment to shine.
Yeah, I mean you've been shining this whole time, so you might this whole podcast was about you. So, but any final words?
I guess the final words is focus on your purpose, your vision, your goals. You're not too old or too young to do something.
Yeah.
And this is just like speaking generally to everybody who watches, her podcast or watches my videos. There's nothing that you can't do if you don't put your mind to it. And for me, like speaking to like my Christian public and, Christian circle of people watching this video is to really like solidify, the reason why, you're born. Like find what God gave you, whether it's singing, whether it's dancing, whether it's like poetry, whatever skill, whatever talent you have that God has given you, you use it for the greater good. You don't know who you're impacting. You're not only impacting Christians, but you're also impacting people outside, And, Jesus says this. He says, you're a city set on a hill. You're light. That means you're meant to shine. You're meant to stand out, And so everything that God has given you, use it for his glory. Use it for a purpose. Find meaning, find joy in the little things, And after that, like, life is Gucci, man. Like, I don't think there's anything else I can add to that. It's just like figuring that out. And I guess for, aspiring lawyers and people who are in undergrad and in the process, don't give up. Because there was a point in time where I felt like giving up. And somebody was there to tell me, hey, don't give up. Hey, there's a purpose. Hey, there's a vision. Hey, there's a group of people who will need your help in the future.
Yeah.
And so, whether it's the LSAT, whether it's the application process, whether it's navigating the first year of law school, there will always be people who have gone ahead of you and who can be there as a beacon of hope, as a beacon of light, as a mentor, as a friend, so having those groups of people. So community essentially is what I'm trying to say, fine tune the people who are your people and everything will be Gucci and smooth.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in to the Chit Chat Show, for learning about Faith Law Project. Thank you, Joshua, for coming on, sharing your story, sharing your faith, the law, and more. I am so happy to have had you here.
Thank you.
For this episode. I can't wait to see what's next. Make sure I tune into his content, follow his Instagram, follow his TikTok, and I believe it's Faith Law _project.
Yes, Faith Law
Yes, Faith Law _project. You know what I mean? This is Faith Law _project, but this is also Joshua. Those are two different things.
Two different entities, yes.
You know what I mean? Two different. He's also an actual human being, guys. You know what I mean? But you get to learn about him through his content too, as well. So if you want to know more about him, know more about the law, reach out to him. Who knows? Maybe he might someday be a mentor.
Or your lawyer.
Oh, you know what I mean? So yeah. So thank you guys so much. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, turn on that post notification, share it to somebody. And yeah, that's it, y'all. Bye.